The first reaction wasn't applause. It was laughter. Not loud, just enough for people nearby to hear. Bruce Lee heard it. He didn't look up. It came from somewhere in the middle rows. A short, almost casual sound, not meant to cause a scene, not sharp enough to be called rude, just a quick release of doubt. The kind of laugh people make when they think they already understand what they're about to see. A few people around the source reacted automatically. A shoulder leaned closer. A quiet comment followed. Someone's lips curved into a smirk. It wasn't coordinated, it wasn't cruel, but it was dismissive. The room itself felt ordinary. A gymnasium converted into a demonstration space. The ceiling lights above were too bright, flattening everything into pale tones. Two standing stage lights pointed toward the center, making the floor glow, and the edges of the room fade into shadow. The polished wood reflected faint outlines of movement. Rows of metal folding chairs stretched from the stage to the back wall. Some were slightly misaligned. A few creaked whenever someone shifted their weight. Programs rustled in restless hands. Shoes tapped against the floor in uneven rhythms. People had come out of curiosity, but curiosity can turn into judgment quickly. Arms folded across chests, heads tilted slightly to one side, eyebrows raised in quiet evaluation. Bruce Lee walked into the center of the light and stopped. He didn't hurry to claim the space. He didn't pause dramatically either. He simply arrived and stood there, feet placed evenly beneath him, shoulders relaxed, hands resting naturally at his sides. The laughter faded into a low ripple of murmurs. Someone coughed. Someone adjusted their jacket. Someone leaned back deeper into their chair, as if preparing to watch something they weren't expecting to take seriously. He remained still. No visible reaction, no tightening around the eyes, no shift in stance. He didn't scan the crowd to identify who laughed. He didn't search for friendly faces. He didn't lower his head in embarrassment or raise it in challenge. He just stood there, breathing evenly. That stillness created a pause the audience hadn't planned for. Usually, when someone laughs, there's a response, a smile, a defensive joke, a quick explanation, something to fill the space. He gave them none of it. A few seconds stretched longer than they should have. The murmur softened, not because he silenced it, but because there was nothing pushing against it. The room had expected energy to bounce back, some sign that he felt it. There was no bounce, only presence. The light remained steady on him. The rest of the room dimmer by comparison, faces partially visible, expressions uncertain. The initial laughter, small as it was, began to feel exposed. He hadn't interrupted the sound. He had interrupted the pattern. The audience waited for a reaction that didn't come. And in that absence, the mood shifted slightly, not dramatically, just enough to be noticed. The moment wasn't loud. It was suspended, and everyone in the room could feel that something had just been decided, even though no one had said a word. He didn't speak. He didn't introduce himself. There was no explanation of what was about to happen. He adjusted his stance slightly, as if aligning himself with the floor rather than the audience. One foot angled forward, weight balanced evenly, shoulders loose, chin level. Then he began moving, not fast, not slow in a dramatic way, just controlled. His first motion was small, an arm rising to shoulder height, elbow steady, wrist aligned. It wasn't meant to impress. It looked almost simple, but there was no hesitation in it, no uncertainty. The movement stopped exactly where it was meant to stop. A faint whisper came from the left side of the room. "That's it?" Someone else shifted in their chair, the metal legs scraping lightly against the floor. A program folded closed. A breath released through someone's nose. He didn't speed up to compete with the doubt. He didn't exaggerate the next movement to correct the room. He continued at the same measured rhythm. His steps were deliberate, each pivot clean, no extra motion, no wasted energy. His breathing remained visible in the slight rise and fall of his chest. A minute passed, The laughter did not return. The whispers still existed, but softer now, less frequent. The room had expected something awkward, something uneven, something to confirm the first reaction. It wasn't happening. Another minute passed. He shifted into a sequence that connected movements more fluidly, one motion flowing into the next without pause. It wasn't flashy. There was no dramatic stomp of the foot or sharp shout to command attention. Just precision. The air around him seemed to narrow. The light held steady. His shadow moved across the floor behind him, crisp and defined. Someone in the third row uncrossed their arms. Someone else leaned forward slightly, elbows resting on knees. The dismissiveness didn't vanish all at once. It thinned. Gradually, he remained neutral, focused inward, not outward, as if the stage were an empty room and the crowd simply happened to be there. The earlier laughter felt misplaced now, but no one addressed it. He continued, steady, unhurried, unreactive. 3 minutes in, the atmosphere had shifted enough to feel it physically. The room wasn't quieter in a dramatic sense. It was concentrated. The random sounds, chair creaks, throat clears, fabric shifting became isolated rather than constant. You could hear them individually now. He transitioned into quicker movements, not explosive, but sharper. The timing between each action tightened. His feet connected to the floor with precision, turning smoothly without sliding. There was no performance energy directed at the crowd, no glance to measure their reaction. He wasn't seeking approval, he was simply consistent. That consistency began to draw attention. A man near the aisle lowered his phone, which had been loosely raised. A woman in the back adjusted her seat to get a clearer line of sight. The earlier smirks had faded into neutral focus. Another minute passed. The silence wasn't forced. It was chosen. No one wanted to interrupt it now. The person who had laughed first shifted forward in their chair. Their posture no longer relaxed, their expression no longer amused. He moved through a faster combination, arms cutting clean lines through the air, feet pivoting without hesitation. The movement stopped exactly when they should. Not early, not late. No dramatic finish to each sequence. No invitation for applause. Just continuation. 4 minutes in, the room felt closer to the stage than it had at the beginning. Not physically closer, but attentive. The distance between skepticism and focus had narrowed, and he still hadn't acknowledged any of it. 5 minutes in, the shift became visible. Not dramatic, not sudden, just visible. Someone near the back stood up. It wasn't a reaction. It didn't look like excitement. The person simply rose from their folding chair, pushing it back slightly with the back of their legs. The metal scraped softly against the floor. The sound carried farther than expected because the room was already thinning into quiet. They didn't clap. They didn't call out. They just stood. At first, a few heads turned toward them, confused. Then the attention returned to the stage. Bruce Lee did not pause. He didn't accelerate. He didn't adjust to the person standing. His breathing remained even. Shoulders level. Eyes focused forward, but not locked on anyone in particular. He moved into another sequence, slightly faster than before. His feet connected to the floor with certainty. Each pivot precise. Each stop controlled. There was no tension in his body, only structure. Another 30 seconds passed. A second person stood, closer to the middle rows this time. They leaned forward first, as if deciding, then slowly rose. Their chair folded inward slightly as they shifted away from it. The room noticed, not with noise, but with awareness. The energy wasn't rising. It was concentrating. The earlier laughter had fully disappeared now, not replaced with admiration, not replaced with applause, just replaced with focus. He transitioned again, a sharper combination. Faster hands, cleaner turns. No dramatic facial expression, no attempt to heighten the moment. The lighting hadn't changed, the stage hadn't changed. But the way people were watching, had arms that had been crossed, were now resting at sides. People who had leaned back were now upright. A minute passed, then another. A third person stood, then two more, almost at the same time but not coordinated. Chairs brushed against calves. Soft metallic sounds repeated in different corners of the room. The movement of people rising created a subtle ripple through the rows. Those seated behind them adjusted to see better. Some remained seated, but straighter now, eyes fixed. He continued as if the room were empty. No acknowledgement, no satisfaction, no tightening in response to the shift. His movements remained consistent, controlled, efficient, direct. Nothing exaggerated to celebrate the standing crowd. 7 minutes in, nearly half the audience was upright, not cheering, not recording, not whispering, just standing. The silence had weight now, the kind that makes small sounds feel larger than they are. The soft friction of fabric, the faint intake of breath, the almost inaudible shift of feet against polished wood. The person who had laughed at the beginning was no longer relaxed. Their posture had changed. They were leaning forward, elbows on knees, eyes steady, no smile. Bruce Lee slowed slightly, not as a finale, not as a statement, just a natural transition between movements. His final sequence in this stretch was clean and uninterrupted. No flourish at the end, no pause for reaction. He returned briefly to stillness, feet grounded, hands relaxed. The room did not fill the silence. It held it. Then, almost without signal, more people rose. One at a time. Rows adjusting upward gradually, chairs shifting back, bodies aligning. It wasn't a surge. It was alignment. By the end of the 8th minute, most of the audience was on their feet. No applause yet. No cheering. Just collective presence. He hadn't grown louder. The room had simply corrected itself around him. 8 minutes in, almost the entire room was standing. Not abruptly, not in a wave, just gradually, until sitting felt out of place. A few chairs remained occupied near the edges, but even those seated were upright now, no longer relaxed into their backs. No one was whispering, no one was checking a program, no one was laughing. Bruce Lee continued without adjusting to the scale of the shift. He didn't widen his stance to command the crowd. He didn't raise his volume. He didn't exaggerate the next sequence to match the attention. His pace stayed consistent. That consistency began to feel deliberate. He moved through one final combination. Short, precise transitions. Hands stopping cleanly. Feet turning without sliding. His balance never breaking, even slightly. The sound of fabric cutting through air was faint but noticeable in the quiet. He stopped, not with a dramatic freeze, just a return to neutral. Feet evenly placed beneath him, arms relaxed at his sides, breathing steady. The room remained on its feet. No eruption followed, no immediate applause, just stillness. It wasn't the kind of silence that feels empty. It felt shared. A few people nodded slightly. One person exhaled through their nose. Another adjusted their posture but didn't sit. The earlier laughter felt distant now, not embarrassing, not corrected publicly, just irrelevant. He didn't bow deeply. He didn't scan the crowd for approval. He didn't gesture to invite a reaction. He simply stood there for a moment, under the same flat stage light he had entered under. The difference wasn't in him. It was in the room. When the first clap came, it wasn't loud. It was a single measured sound from somewhere near the center. It didn't break the atmosphere. It joined it. A few others followed. Not chaotic, not overwhelming, just steady. But even as the clapping spread, it remained controlled. No shouting, no whistles, no raised voices. Most people stayed standing. Not because they were told to, because sitting didn't feel appropriate anymore. He turned and walked off the stage the same way he had walked on. Unhurried, unreactive. The folding chairs creaked again as people slowly sat back down. Conversations resumed, but softer than before. Not excited, not exaggerated, just thoughtful. The first sound had been laughter. The last was presence. He hadn't demanded the room. The room had adjusted itself.